1902, the late Benjamin Russell began an industry which today stands as a monument to this great industrialist. Located in the southeastern part of the great state of Alabama and in the cotton-growing section of the United States, Russell of Alabama is ideally located for obtaining the raw cotton, which it converts into materials and clothing for dress and sportswear. An industry which began in a one-room wooden building and through the years has grown until today it occupies 7 modern mill structures, which in themselves stand as a tribute to the handiwork of mankind. Stretching far out over the countryside, this industry provides jobs for thousands of men and women. In any single day of our lives, we see hundreds of commonplace objects, many of which we accept without much thought. But each has its separate story of the importance it plays in our everyday life, the story of human inventiveness, of the work of minds, hands, and machines. This is an industry devoted to the manufacture of one of the oldest fundamental human needs, which has remained basically the same throughout the ages, materials for clothing. Its greatness is shadowed only by that of its founder and of its men and women who man the machines to produce a product of quality, usefulness, and beauty as their contribution to the service of their fellow man. The marvels of today's textile industry are truly an inspiration to the young and old alike, and when looked upon, it makes us ask ourselves the questions, what, why, how. Before beginning the story of how the products are made, let's take a brief look at the community. The mills are centrally located, and the houses, church, school, and hospital form the symbol of a giant wheel around their industrial center. Realizing a man's home to be one of his strongest assets, Russell of Alabama provides a modern building for as many of its families as possible. These houses stretch far into the outlying area and cover thousands of acres. Each house is company-owned and made available to the people at a very low rate and are classed as an indirect asset. From the health standpoint, each home has plenty of sunshine, is wisely located, conveniently arranged with proper lighting, plumbing, heating, and waste disposal, and is enhanced with a measure of tasteful beauty to enrich the lives of the people. The most powerful single influence in all the world and in any community is the church. In this southern community, Sunday is church day, the day in which all hearts are joined together as they were taught by their forefathers to give thanks to their Creator. In no land does the church play so important a part in the lives of its people as in the communities and cities of the United States. It is a basic factor in our lives, whether at work or at play. Education has been called the builder and guardian of civilization. This modern school building is a gift to the younger generation of the community. Here the hearts and minds of the men and women of tomorrow are molded by the skilled hands of today. The physical development programs of our modern schools are as important as learning the 3 R's. These modern playground facilities play an important part. Large playgrounds away from the present dangers of speeding traffic is another modern school necessity. With the proper facilities, these small bodies are being well developed. A good combination for building strong bodies is plenty of exercise and a well-balanced meal. In the school cafeteria, trained dietitians see that the children and adults are served with the proper food. The community hospital is second to none in the nation. All the instruments and facilities for scientific care are at the hands of the best physicians and surgeons. The services of this organization are made available to the employees through a group insurance plan. Here the sick can have expert care with trained nurses and attendants day and night. In short, every modern medical discovery needed to ensure the best chance of recovery is available. In these few scenes, we have shown you the basic factors of our community. Now let us begin the story of the products we manufacture. The textile industry, since its very beginning, has used cotton. It is the most widely used of all fibers. More of our clothing is made from cotton than from all the wool, linen, and silk put together. The seeds are planted early in the spring. The first blossoms are snow white, and a pink flush gradually appears, and finally they become a deep red. These red petals drop off, leaving little green squares. In the center of each square is a small green capsule filled with seed. These capsules are called cotton bolls. When matured, the husk is dark brown and is cracked along 4 or 5 seams, and the fibers pop out looking like fluffy snowballs. The snow white fibers must then be picked. As far back as history records, cotton has been used for making clothing, and today it supplies the world with 4/5 of its materials for this purpose. After the bolls begin to open, large groups can be seen gathering the soft, fleecy fibers. It is important that this job be done as soon as possible to keep the cotton from being stained and discolored by weather influences. As the long canvas bags, which are swung from the shoulders of the pickers, are filled, they are carried to the truck or wagon where they are weighed. From this weight, each picker is paid, and it is also used to determine when a bale of cotton has been picked. 1,300 pounds of seed cotton will produce a 500-pound bale of cotton and 800 pounds of seed. After being emptied into the truck, the long journey from the cotton field to the consumer begins. At the gin, the cotton is sucked up through a large pipe by a current of air which carries it inside. It is then dropped into feeders which distribute it evenly to hook 2 saws. These saw teeth are on a cylinder which revolves at a very high speed and separates the lint from the seed. The heavy seed fall below and are carried away for industrial use. The lint, being very light and fluffy, travels with a current of air to a huge press where it is formed into a compact bale. Each bale is wrapped with bagging and bound with iron strips and then returned to its owner. Before being sold, the bale must be classified into one of 9 grades established by the government to determine its quality and value. It is then sold to wholesale cotton buyers, cotton merchants, or to a cooperative association. Russell of Alabama uses approximately 30,000 bales of cotton annually. Due to the large quantity required to operate the mills, most of the cotton is bought from wholesale cotton merchants who ship it to the mills on large trailer trucks and by rail. Here it is stored in huge warehouses for future use. The cotton purchasing and receiving department has the important task of grading the bales as they are received. This is to ensure that the quality of the fibers measures up to the specifications required for manufacturing Russell products. To do this, samples are taken from each bale and the fibers are again stapled and graded. Each bale has certain characteristics which make it desirable or undesirable for the different kinds of textile products being manufactured. Here we see the samples of cotton as they are being classed. Due to the varying conditions from one bale to another, it is impossible to produce uniform goods if they are used one bale at a time. To overcome this difficulty and to obtain a more uniform product, several bales are opened. A thin layer of cotton is taken from each and is thrown into a hopper where it is rolled and tumbled for a thorough mixing. This mixture is fed in small quantities to a conveyor belt. It then travels to a large bulky machine called an opener. This machine frees the fibers of their heavier impurities, such as leaf, moss, and dirt. A current of air then carries the fluffy fibers to the picker room. Here it is automatically distributed to the line of machines as it is needed. By means of large beaters revolving very rapidly, most of the dirt and trash is extracted from the stock. Large quantities of air carry the fiber to a screen where they are formed into a thick sheet. As the fibers are slowly drawn to the front of the machine, they are mechanically controlled so that each yard of lap delivered weighs the same. The sheet of fibers is then wound on a pin, forming a package called a lap. The package thus formed is reduced in size so that it can be easily handled and is conveniently arranged for use on the card. The uniformity of its weight is an important factor toward producing strong, even yarn. Since early times, man has used dyes and stains and has gone to infinite trouble and expense to make clothes beautiful. In this modern, efficient dye plant, thousands of bales of cotton are dyed annually. To satisfy the instinctive love of color, trained men are employed to carefully compound the dyes. This process chemically incorporates the fiber with the dye, thus producing fast and unfading colors. These dyed fibers are then formed into laps as shown in the preceding process and stored for future use on the carding machine. Our next objective is to reduce this bulky mass of fibers so that they can be easily handled and begin the process of arranging them parallel with one another so they can be twisted. This work is performed by the card. This machine takes out the very short fibers and eliminates the smaller particles of trash. The cotton fibers are carded into a thin web and then folded into a round continuous strand called card sliver. In this stage, the fibers are very clean, as all the dirt and trash has been removed. When examined, one can see that the strand is very fluffy and spongy and is easily pulled apart. The work of arranging several of these strands side by side to form a lap suitable to be drafted on the drawing frame is accomplished by the sliver lapper. 16 of the cans are placed behind the machine. As the strands are drawn forward, they are formed into a sheet, which is then pressed lightly and wound onto a wooden core. 2 metal discs press against the sides of the lap to make a straight, even selvage, which is essential in the next process. These laps are placed on the drawing frame and slowly drawn under the action of several pairs of rolls and drafted into a thin sheet. The fibers are again folded into one continuous strand and coiled into a can. The silver-like strand is then ready for the slubber. A large quantity of full cans are collected together to form what is termed a creel. They are then placed behind the machine. The object of this process is to reduce the size of the sliver and to insert a small amount of twist as we prepare a package suitable to be run on the spinning frame. This machine processes about 100 ends at one time. The ingenious method of winding each strand on the bobbin is accomplished by a very complicated train of gears and mechanical motions. As the strands are drawn from the can, they are correctly positioned to enter the drafting process. They are then drafted, twisted, and formed into a neat package to be used on the spinning frame. Among the triumphs of the inventor's skill is the modern spinning frame. The present-day method of spinning yarn is responsible for the great strides made in the textile industry. The spinning wheel of the old days could in no way compete with this machine. Mass production, speed, and quality are only a few of its advantages. Among the wonders of this machine are the spindle, ring, and traveler. Working in perfect coordination, these parts insert the twist in the yarn and wind it onto the bobbin. They make possible the larger quantities of yarn for a better textile product at a lower cost. As the fibers receive their final drafting process, they are now ready to be prepared for weaving. To obtain the proper amount of humidity in the air, artificial humidification in the textile industry is an important factor. To solve this problem, Russell of Alabama has the most modern system available. This system serves two very important purposes. First, it automatically regulates the amount of moisture in the air, which is an aid to good running spinning. Second, it completely changes the air inside the building every 5 to 7 minutes, thus giving cool, healthful working conditions and an ideal climatic condition for the spinning of yarn. Since the yarn from the spinning frame is too short for practical use, it is carried to the winder. On this machine, several bobbins of yarn are tied end to end and wound onto a comb. In addition to producing yarns of great length, these machines also inspect each strand mechanically, eliminating slubs and kinks, which adds greatly to the quality of the finished product. A large part of the yarn is dyed on packages. This process requires that the yarn be wound onto a coiled spring which has been covered with a knitted stocking. The package produced are placed on a large carrier and then put in the dye kettle where the color is added. Many factors are involved in this operation. By carefully blending the dyes, an endless variety of shades are possible to greatly enrich the beauty of the yarns. Here the fibers receive their coat of royal colors which they proudly display in the finished product. After the dyeing process, the yarn is then washed, rinsed, and extracted. The carrier is then placed over a system which forces hot air through the yarn to evaporate the water and hasten the drying process. The shades are then compared to see that they are correctly matched, and the yarn is ready to be wound onto beams. The creel of the warper is specially made to hold several hundred packages of yarn. We are now ready to form several strands side by side into a horizontal sheet which can be run on the slasher. The threads to form the beams are carefully assembled in their right positions. As they are placed in the creel, small hand knotters are used to tie them together. Each individual thread is then brought forward through a drop wire and a comb to establish a sheet of yarn. In this manner, they are drawn from the combs and wound in a parallel order upon a large spool called a warper beam. In case any one of the threads breaks, the machine automatically stops in time to make an effective piecing. Due to the high speeds of these machines, only a few are used. Therefore, a considerable volume of production is necessary in order to dispose of the large quantities of yarn produced. In order to ensure the warp yarns against injury from harness wear in the looms, it is necessary to coat them with a thin layer of starch before winding them up on the loom beam. This is performed by immersing them in a hot mixture containing starch, softening oils, and preservative. Warper beams to form the required number of ends in the cloth are assembled in the creel. As the yarns are led from the beams in perfect sequence, they are immersed in the boiling starch mixture. All excess liquid is squeezed out by a set of rolls. As the yarn leaves the size box, it passes over large steam-heated cylinders, the speed of which is automatically controlled so the yarn will dry properly. The threads are then separated by rods to make certain they are not starched together. As the beam becomes full, a strip of gum tape is pasted upon the threads. This holds them in their original position. The tape is then split in half so the ends will be held on both sides. Here the yarn has a very thin coat of starch. Each thread is protected to help it withstand the process of weaving. Another warp for the loom. The machine is started very slowly and the sheet of yarn is pulled forward and securely fastened to the journal. To locate the threads in the proper eye of the harness, the full beam is carried to the drawing-in department. Here the harnesses are mounted in a stationary frame where good light and quiet prevail. The operator with the weave pattern in full view draws the successive yarn through the correct harness by use of a steel hook. Because of the endless variety of colors and patterns in the cloth, this operation is done by hand. After the warp is prepared, it is now ready for the loom. The beam is then transported to the weaving department and placed in the loom. The harnesses are arranged in their proper positions in which they operate. All necessary adjustments are made and the warp is then checked to see that all ends are tied together before the loom is started. The modern power loom of today is another factor of mass production in the textile industry. The principle of this machine has changed very little for a long period of time, but its speed together with numerous stop motions have been greatly altered. Through the actions of cams, levers, and flying shuttles, these machines are making yard after yard of cotton fabric. Inch by inch, the cloth is made and formed into neat rolls. Even though the machines are in perfect condition mechanically, they still need the skilled touch of the human hand to attain the characteristics of quality in their products. When a warp runs out and it is desired to repeat the same weave in the loom, a portable tying-in machine is used to tie the ends of the old and new warp together. The first objective is to arrange the ends in an orderly fashion. The threads of both warps are brushed and combed until they are parallel in every respect. The old warp is then fastened down securely and placed to form the bottom layer. The new warp is then arranged directly above and the ends are stretched tight and fastened with a bar, which holds them in their correct position. All crossed ends are carefully straightened and the tying head is placed in position. The machine is then ready to begin its work of tying the ends together. By means of a small crank which is turned by the operator, the machine is made to automatically select a thread from the bottom row and one from the top row and join them together. This operation is repeated until all the ends are tied. Then the knots are pulled through the harness and reed of the loom, and the process of weaving cloth is again started. After the fabrics are woven, they are thoroughly inspected. In the cloth room, they are drawn over an inspecting table by a slow-motion measuring device. On this machine, it is possible to detect any defects in the fabric. When defects are found, they are denoted by placing a colored string in the selvage of the cloth. In a later inspection, all of these parts are removed. Each yard of fabric is inspected several times by the customer. In many instances, it is possible to correct certain minor defects caused by the loom. The fabrics then go to the folder. The purpose of this machine is to arrange the cloth into successive layers, each 1 yard in length. In this form, it is easier to handle and arrangement is such that it can be carefully examined and cut if necessary. This machine is designed to fold the cloth at a very rapid speed. Thus, large quantities are processed in a very short period of time. Cutting and grading of cloth is one of the most important operations because at this point the fabric has been made. Hours and hours of labor and many dollars worth of materials and equipment have been used. An inexperienced man could be very costly by cutting unnecessarily or allowing defects to go unnoticed. Therefore, great skill is necessary in order to grade the materials. It is important that a full knowledge of the use of the fabrics be known, because this department is responsible for grading them according to customer specifications. This responsibility is fully realized by the mill. After cutting and grading, the length is then denoted by counting the folds. The number of yards in each bolt and the style number of the fabric is then written on the end, and it is stored with other materials of its own grade and class. The processes involved in the treatment of cotton goods after they have been inspected and graded is generally known as the wet processing operations. These normally consist of cure boiling, bleaching, moisturizing, piece dyeing, and finishing. These operations are performed in the plant referred to as a bleachery. This cloth is shown entering the piece dyeing machine. It was previously cure boiled, bleached, moisturized to assure even penetration of the dye and improve the general appearance of the finished fabric. As the cloth enters the dye jig, it is dyed, then dried, and finished. One of the important operations in this modern bleachery is sandfrising the fabrics. The cloth passes over a number of tension bars and through automatic guide rolls. These control the amount of cloth entering the machine. It is then passed through a steam housing where it is sprayed with water and then under the action of electric shoes where the actual sandfrising process begins. At the front of the machine, each lot is checked very carefully for the amount of shrinkage which has taken place. Cloth processed on this machine has certain standards and specifications imposed before it can be classed as sandfrized material. It is necessary that the fabric be shrunk to eliminate variations of more than 1% in either direction when made into clothing. As the test sales are recorded and a permanent record is kept for future reference. Sandfrising adds a very small cost to each yard of fabric. Manufacturers of garments using sandfrized materials no longer allow extra yardage for shrinkage, but cut all washable articles to actual size. The cloth is now inspected again. This is the last inspection process before the fabrics leave our plant. In this operation, nothing is taken for granted. Each yard of cloth is carefully and skillfully examined to ensure that quality in every respect is kept up to their original specifications. Doubtless you have wondered how the cloth is formed into the neatly arranged bolts which are seen at your favorite piece goods counter. This is accomplished by the double folding machine. Here the fabric is neatly arranged in a package suitable for shipping and for display by the consumer. At long last, the journey of the cotton, the most useful of all fibers, is in its finished stage. These fabrics have been made possible by the work of nature, plus the shrewd ingenuity of the human mind and the skill of the human hand. They represent the work of many people, each in his own profession having done a marvelous job to produce this fabric. Modern methods of manufacturing textile products have made possible the low selling price, which is almost unbelievable. For only a few cents per yard, you can purchase these fabrics. They were made by the most skilled men in their profession. The skill of these men and women and their methods of manufacturing these products is important to you as an individual. For many years, down through the ages, men dreamed of products being made by magic and not by work. For thousands of years, no one did much about it except to turn their dreams into fairy stories. The magic carpet, Aladdin's lamp, or the seven-league boots. Finally, out of the daily efforts of simple men, these dreams slowly grew into realities. Russell of Alabama and its skilled men and women have in their possession the magic touch that surpasses the most fantastic fairy story ever told. Wealth in the form of these beautiful fabrics, plus the machinery and skill required to produce them, are your faithful servants more powerful than any genie. Another important phase of production at Russell Mills is the knitting operations. Like other old handicrafts, it too has become an important machine industry. It is fascinating to watch the fabrics grow as the needles are raised and lowered automatically. The fabrics from these machines are made into underwear and garments for use in football, baseball, basketball, and many other interesting sports which we enjoy. As the cloth comes from the knitting machine, it must be prepared for the bleaching process. It is then placed on the calendar and formed into rolls. Thousands of yards of fabric can be run on this machine in a very short period of time. It then goes through the bleaching process. By the action of various chemicals, the cloth is made snow white. To remove the chemicals absorbed during the bleaching process, it then goes through the slack loop washer. This machine, due to its special construction and the great quantities of fresh water used, will wash efficiently from 200 to 300 yards per minute. To hasten the drying process, the cloth is then placed in the extractor and whirled at a very high speed, removing the water by centrifugal force. Afterwards, it is pressed and folded into bundles or rolls. Since a great quantity of this material is made into sweatshirts and warm-up suits, it is run through a machine called a fleecer. This process scratches the cloth and puts a thick fuzz on its face, thus increasing its ability to hold the heat generated by the body. In the cutting room, it is laid out on long tables, several layers thick. It is then cut into sections of the necessary length, and each layer having defective material is removed. The stacks are then marked by placing a pattern and tracing around its edge. These marks serve as a guide as the pattern is cut with a shearing machine. In the sewing department, the various patterns are assembled and the garments begin to take form. In a systematic manner, all parts are skillfully added as the garment passes down the assembly line. The old saying that it takes 9 tailors to make a man must be revised today, because many hands are required to turn out the continuous flow of products. As if by magic, one garment after another is continually being passed to the inspector, who looks them over carefully. Before the garments are ready to be shipped, they must be folded. Most of this work is done by hand and according to customer specifications. In many instances, customers specify that their garments be folded around a cardboard support. This gives an air of individuality to the product and makes it a desirable package for display purposes. To bring out the sheen and beauty of its material, each garment is then pressed on a large machine especially made for this purpose. Several garments are laid side by side, and the large steam-heated press is then closed, exerting pressure and heat to form the fold into creases. Each garment bears its own individual label, so the consumer can identify the manufacturer. After the garments are pressed, they are then stacked on a table and arranged in lots of 1 dozen each, and then bound with a paper label to form a neat package, which is then made ready to ship. Other specifications require that the garments be placed in paper bags. In this manner, they are formed into lots of 1 dozen each and tied securely before shipping. Another important task is making cardboard boxes to accommodate the large volume of production. The first step is to run the large sheets of cardboard through the scoring machine. Here they receive creases which are used as a guide in the cutting and folding operation. The corners are cut so the sides will meet as the paper is folded. Each corner is then fastened securely by a strip of gum tape. The box is then covered around the edge with gum paper of the desired color. With a rotating motion, the paper is pressed down smoothly. It is then passed on and the corners